أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان آمنت بالله صدق الله العظيم.
Just gonna pick up. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد الغر المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين وسيدي ولد آدم ولا فخر محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه وبعد. So first I want to express my gratitude for the brothers and sisters who have graciously invited me to address you on this evening. It's a great honor for me. You honor me by just thinking that we can have something that we can discuss together and inshallah bring some semblance of benefit bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And this is in accordance with the advice of our Prophet ﷺ to have, from amongst the character traits, is to have husn al-dhan bin nas, to have a good opinion of people, which in turn extends from husn al-dhan billah, having a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as expressed in the hadith al-Qudsi, أنا على ظن عبدي بي. إن ذكرني في نفسي ذكرت في نفسي وإن ذكرني في ملأ ذكرت في ملأ خيرا منه. Where Allah says in the hadith al-Qudsi, I am at the good opinion of my servant. If he remembers me within himself, I will remember him. And if he remembers me in a group, then I will remember him in a group greater than the group that he is in. So just our being together and congregating together and coming together for nothing else than to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, notwithstanding anything else that we do. Allah honors us. It's a great honor to be part of that in whichever capacity that we can. So, Alhamdulillah, right? And we say, Alhamdulillah, الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا Allah. Praise to Allah who has guided us to this, and without Him guiding us to this, we would have not been guided. So everything we have, everything that we think we possess, every blessing, every good, every sip of water that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to allow us to have, we should show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we just heard in the verses, or maybe we didn't get to that verse, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this creation for us. وَالْأَرْضُ وَضَعَهَا لِلْأَنَامِ وَالْأَرْضُ وَضَعَهَا لِلْأَنَامِ. And the earth has been made لِلْأَنَامِ, which includes us. And al-anam is anything that walks or treads or is on the face of the earth. So there's also an indication it's for us and it's for others. But what is the distinctive feature about human beings versus other creatures? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also informs us of this when He said to the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I will place a steward upon the earth. And the angels responded back, قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلم. They said, the angels responded to Allah, how can you put a creature that will sow corruption and spill blood, and we are the ones who are hymning and singing your praises. And we know about the angels, they are beings of light that we may not be able to perceive, but nonetheless have a very special place in all of our life's affairs. There are some of them that are called al-hafadha, some of them are called the guardian angels that are with us all the time. They number at least 10, every single human being. And we have Raqib and Atid, the two angels that are recording our deeds. And we have other angels like the angel of revelation or of wahi, Jibreel alayhi salam, wa Mikail, wa Israfil, wa Azrail, many of the different sorts of angels. And there are 70,000 of them at any one time, entering and exiting from what is known as al-Bayt al-Ma'mur. That Bayt that has a connection to al-Bayt, to the house in Mecca, the Kaaba. And in any one moment, 70,000 enter and 70,000 exit. And perhaps this is what we was referring to in that hadith I just quoted, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, if we have a good opinion of Him and if we remember Him in a group as we're doing now, then those 70,000 fil mala' al-a'la, in that place that is beyond our perception, but nonetheless we believe to be there and be as real, if not more real than the existence that we now occupy, they are also remembering us. So all of this is a great honor for the human being. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored us. He has given us the khilafah. And the khilafah means the stewardship of the earth. Al-ard wada'aha lil-anam. The earth has been made for the anam, all that those tread upon it. But the one who has been assigned the amana and accepted the amana, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَنْ يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ. We have offered the amana, offered the stewardship, the trust actually, amana means trust, or the trusteeship of the earth to the heavens and the mountains and the earth. And it said no, it refused. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظُلُومًا جَهُولًا. But the human being decided to take it up. And perhaps because of out of our ignorance or our lack of perception, the weightiness of the matter of taking on the amana. And perhaps this is what the angels sensed when they said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءِ. You're going to put some creature in it who's going to spill blood, who's going to sow corruption and spill blood. قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said back to the angels, I know what you do not know. So what is distinctive about the human being? What makes us worthy of hamd al-amana, right, of taking on this trusteeship or the stewardship of the earth. وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I have taught Adam all of the names of everything. And then he asked the angels, tell me these names. They said, we don't know the names. We only know what you have taught us. We only know what you have taught us. So what distinguishes and discerns humanity, from the rest of the creature is what? Knowledge. We also heard from the ayat from our brother, Hafidahullah, Ar-Rahman, علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. Notice the order. Ar-Rahman. هو الرحمن عز وجل. So the creation of the universe is a divine act of mercy. Ar-Rahman علم القرآن. He taught the Quran before خلق الإنسان. This verse comes before the third verse, which says he's created the human being. ثم علمه البيان. Right? علمه البيان comes after. So Ar-Rahman علم القرآن. He taught the Quran. And our belief that the Quran is representative and indicative of the uncreated attribute of speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been there. It's an eternal attribute. It's indistinguishable from the essence of God and inseparable from the essence of God. Not indistinguishable, but inseparable from the essence of God. So we don't understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except that we also understand Huwa al-Alim. He knows all. He knows everything. His knowledge is not something that's renewable. He's always known it and always will know it, immutable, unassailable, unchangeable, forever. فَهُوَ الْبَاقِي وَهُوَ الْقَدِيمُ. He is the everlasting and he is the one who has always been there. He has a beginning without beginninglessness, and he has an end without ending, everlasting, Azza wa Jal. So if we know all that about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, علم القرآن. Then he taught us the Quran. And the Quran فيه تبيان لكل شيء لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه. It is clear signs and a clear way for everything. For everything. لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه. There is no falsehood that will come to it, neither from the front or from the back. ثم خلق الإنسان. Then he created the human being. So the creation of the human being is an act of mercy. The teaching of the Quran to all of creation is also an act of mercy. علمه البيان. And he taught us the bayan, how to convey the knowledge, how to live the knowledge, how to embody the knowledge. And the one who is the embodier of all of this, the one without which we would know nothing, هو رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. So هو الإنسان الكامل. He is the perfect and most complete human being. So not only does he convey the message, he is the message. He is the bayyinah. لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة رسول من الله يتلو صحفا مطهرة. So he is described as the clear sign. The Prophet ﷺ himself is the sign. He is the bayyinah. And so every movement of his life, every still moment of his life, every word that he uttered in his life, every glance that he glanced in his life are all sunan. They're all indications, and they're all teachings, and they are all mercies from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in order to be worthy of the khilafah, in order to be worthy of the stewardship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon us, upon humanity, we must be worthy of following the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Quran describes that in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, uswatun hasana liman kana yarju Allah wal yawm al-akhir. He is the best example, he is the greatest example for those who are hopeful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the last day. And here you can think of the last day, it's haqq, it's true, but it might also be an indication of there are ramifications and consequences for all that we do in this place. This place by nature is temporary. This place by nature is fleeting. The famous Arab poet Abu al-Ataha, he said, ألا في كل شيء آية تدل على أنه هو الواحد. Verily, there's a sign in everything that indicates he is the one. And so we have كتاب الله المسطور وكتاب الله المنظور. Two books we need to read. We read the Quran, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the other book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, creation. There are signs in everything. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. Verily, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the changing of day into night and night into day, there are signs, the ulil albab. There are signs for those who are the people, literally, albab means the people of essences. Al-lub is the essence of something. Or the lub is the inner fruit of something that has an outer shell. So it's not a sign for everybody. It's a sign for those who have a strong inner essence, a strong inner core. Who are they? Who are these people? How do we know them? الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. These are the people who remember Allah standing and sitting down and laying down. And they say these are the three positions, physical positions any person could be in. So in other words, constantly, all the time, they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What else do they do? وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And they contemplate the creation of the heavens and the earth. And what is the conclusion that they draw from contemplation of the heavens and the earth? رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. You could have not created this in vain. Subhanak, glory to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keep us from the hellfire. So we see that the whole world around us, the whole creation of the universe, is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is a book to be read. Those are the first two things I want you to think about. Everything around us is a sign of the oneness of God. And number two, it is like a book to be read. It is how we increase our faith. Contemplation of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, he instructed his companions, he told them, لا تفكروا في ذات الله ولكن تفكروا في آلائه. أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Don't think about the essence of God because it's incomprehensible. Whatever you think Allah is, in terms of image, He's not that. Because Allah does not resemble any images. He doesn't resemble anything of this place because this place is constrained by space and time, by size, by direction, by color. Allah doesn't have any of that. ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. There is nothing like Him, and He is the all-hearing and He is the all-seeing. So He can't be anything like that. But rather, contemplate His signs. Contemplate the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we just said the signs are everywhere. You know, it's interesting, like when people can't discern like what's behind a particular phenomenon or something, they'll say, oh, this will take an act of God, right? Or, you know, that hurricane was an act of God, or that tsunami was an act of God. But you waking up in the morning and taking your breath is an act of God too. Just you don't realize it, you don't see it. right? You're distracted. Like the Quran says, ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون. You have been distracted by the multiplicity. ألهاكم التكاثر. You've been distracted by the multiplicity. Yes, it looks like multiplicity. Black and green and up and down and left and right and north and south and east and west. Big and small. Yeah. Seems like kathra, takathur. But one thing that will give you piercing insight, حتى زرتم المقابر. And this ziyarah is not a temporary one. This visit of the grave is when you actually are put in there, not visiting the graveyard, in the grave. فبصرك اليوم حديد. At that point, your eyesight or your insight will be piercing. It will be unmistakable. It will make no mistakes. It will see reality as it really is. But someone can have reality and see reality as it is in this life. The same surah, Ar-Rahman, talks about Jannatain or Jannatan. Two paradises. How's there two? Well, there's Jannati Ad. There's a paradise of the next life. But they said there's a type of paradise in this world. Is that the paradise where you have a 8-figure account at Barclays Bank and you own a super yacht that's 100 feet long? Actually, that's not big at all, right? 200 feet long? No, not that paradise. That's not a paradise. The paradise of this life, they said Jannat al-Ma'arif, the Jannah of knowledge, the Jannah of al-Qana'ah, to be contented, the Jannah of Rida. رضي الله عنه ورضوا عنه ذلك لمن خشي ربه. Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with him. ذلك لمن خشي ربه. This is for the one who has utmost reverence of his Lord, of their Lord. لمن خشي ربه. إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. The ones who have true reverence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones who know. هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون? Can the one who knows be the same as those who know as those who don't know? They said in this verse, know what exactly? Usually the verb alima in Arabic takes what's called a direct object before bihi. But here, atlaq doesn't say any direct object. So they say mutlaq al-ilm, right? Knowledge in general, but not any knowledge in general, real knowledge. Real knowledge. It's recorded that some of the Salaf, they used to say, ليس العلم بكثرة الرواية وإنما العلم نور يقذفه الله في القلوب. Knowledge is not by how much you've memorized, how much book knowledge you have. Rather, knowledge is a light that is cast into the heart by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That type of knowledge. And when you have that type of knowledge, when you have that type of understanding, when you have that type of Jannah, right? And that Jannah is in the heart. They say, Al-qalbu baytul Rabb. The heart is the temple of God. Wal-qalbu mahallu nadhrillah. And the heart is upon which Allah's gaze falls upon. So the inner states, the inner aspect of things, not the outward. That's why min wara' al-mabani al-ma'ani. From behind the buildings are meanings. Why do I mention all of this? Especially regarding the topic today? Because this is at the heart of the topic. This is at the heart of, let's call it, the Quranic paradigm of how we understand our universe, how we understand our place in it, how we understand the amana, the trust that has been placed upon us. And the one who understood this trust the best, and the one who practiced the preservation of this trust the best, was our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how do we understand the world around us? What do we make of it? One of the things that I think the modern world tries to teach us And I say modern in the general sense, and perhaps a little bit in the philosophical sense about modernity. Because with modernity as a philosophy, there's a certain way of looking at things and a certain way of thinking about things. And one of the things that modernity kind of imposes upon you is to tell you that everything is dead. The rocks are dead, the trees are dead, the grass is dead. Dead is in the sense not having life. Dead in the sense that they are at our disposal to do as we wish. But is that the Quranic paradigm? Is that the paradigm that Allah teaches us? Allama al-Quran? I don't think so. You find numerous instances in the Quran where the heavens and the earth speak. Surah Fussilat, when Allah says to the heavens and the earth, come in compliance or come compelled. ائتيا طوعا أو كرها قال أتينا طائعين. Come to the worship of your Lord in compliance, purposefully, happily, or compelled. قال أتينا طائعين. No, we come in compliance. We come in obedience. The heavens and the earth. وما من شيء إلا يسبح بحمده ولكن لا تفقهون تسبيحه. There is not anything in creation except that it hymns the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولكن لا تفقهون تسبيحهم. But you don't understand their tasbih. You don't understand how they are singing the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we find numerous animals. The dog of Ashab al-Kahf, the hudhud of Sulaiman, Naqat Salih, the she-camel of Salih. We find in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ of the man who found a dog who was dying of thirst, just digging around in the dirt to find any sort of moisture. He took his khuf or his shoe, he went down into the well, ruined his shoe, but nonetheless to quench the thirst of the dog. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentions that this man, who was from a previous nation, community, entered paradise because of that act. Or the woman who had a cat and she kept her prisoner. She did not feed her, nor did she allow her to eat from the vermin. And for that she entered hellfire. Oh, animals, how about things that are not in the animal world? How about rocks? The Prophet ﷺ, even before his prophethood, what we call irhas, something that's a foretelling of the Prophet ﷺ, he would walk by these rocks and they would turn to him and give him salam. How about the palm tree stump that was in the Prophet's mosque ﷺ? And the Sahaba, the companions, he used to use that as the mimbar, right? He used to use that, stand on it to give the khutbah as a mimbar. Until the Sahaba built him a mimbar from wood. When he started to use the mimbar, this is Hadith al-Bukhari, the companion said, we heard a scream like we never heard a scream before, coming from the palm tree stump. Prophet ﷺ walks over to the palm tree stump, he puts his hand on it, and it calmed down. He said, if I didn't do that, then it would have been calling for me and wailing till the day of judgment. Today in the Prophet's mosque, where that tree stump stood, is now a pillar. The pillar of the tree stump. Next to the mihrab of the Prophet ﷺ, a little bit to the left of the minbar. So many of the ulama said, everything around us is alive. It's not dead. The rocks are not dead. The trees are not dead. The ocean is not dead. The animals certainly aren't dead. They do tasbih. They sing the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They hymn the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything in perfect order. لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ تَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. He has two things, al-khalq wal-amr. Creation and the command. الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى. The one who gave everything its creation, then he guided it. He guided the fresh waters of the rivers not to flow into the salt water of the sea. بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. There is a barrier. They don't collide with one another. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it its hidayah. He guided it. That's the hidayah of the guidance of the river, and the guidance of the sea, and the guidance of the birds. How does a bird know how to build the nest? Who taught it how to build the nest? Who taught it how to go forage for food? Who taught it to have what we would look at, this care and nurturing of its chicks, of its little sparrows, and comes back and feeds it? Who taught it all of that? الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى. The one who gave everything its creation, not just he created it, he continues to create it. This is a very important aspect of our creed, of our understanding. Allah didn't just create and then he went home. No. He continues to create. Your continued life, your continued existence, and the existence of the universe, of the earth and the stars and the moon and the planets, they're all acts of God. How often? Every infinitesimal moment. Every, I don't know, nanosecond or whatever, smaller than that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to create. So you are actually a renewed creation, different than the one that was here 3 minutes ago or 1 second ago. Because if Allah didn't choose to do that, we would have nothing. What they call al-adam al-mahad, absolute nothingness. Not darkness. Darkness is a creation, even though it's absence of light. But we wouldn't know it without the light. So it's a creation. al-adam al-mahad, absolute nothingness, would be nothingness. Be nothing at all. And they say that the reason some people don't see the obviousness of the Creator is because Allah did not make us accustomed to what it would be like to have something or nothing without Him. It's like you're in the light all the time and you would never know the darkness. But here, darkness is not physical darkness. Darkness would be the darkness of lack of existence. Something none of us know. Something none of us can even imagine or fathom. But that's what it would be like if Allah chose not to create us. وَهُوَ الْفَاعِلُ الْمُخْتَارُ. He is the one that purposefully chooses every single thing that happens in the universe. وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَكُمْ وَمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah has created you and that which you do. So without Allah's creation, nothing would be here. And without Allah's continued creation, nothing would be here. So He continues to create us and recreate everything around us. And that is the essence of Tawheed. That is the essence of recognizing the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So seeing through the layers of wujud, seeing through the layers of existence, and seeing the one true existence, al-wujud al-haqq. And the one true existence is that of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else is contingent upon the existence of God and the will of Allah and the knowledge of Allah and the speech of Allah. إِنَّمَا إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْءًا أَن يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. When He wants something to be, He says be, and it is. وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ بَيْنَ الْكَافِ وَالنُّونِ. And everything is between the kaf and the noon. Kun fayakun, the two letters. Then it is. But out of His wisdom, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to create in different ways. He created this kawn, this existence, in 6 days. 6 days of ours? No. 6 days of Allah's days, which are much longer days. 1,000 years or 50,000 years. And He created the earth in 4 days and everything that is in it. And He created the skies and the heavens in 2 days and everything that is in it. And He informed the skies and the earth to be and to be how to be. And He put the rivers and He put the trees. And He سخر لنا كل شيء وآتاكم من كل ما سألتموه وإن تعدوا نعمة الله لا تحصوها. And He gave us everything we asked for. And if we were to try to enumerate the one blessing, not the myriad of blessings, not all the blessings, try to enumerate the one blessing, we would not be able to enumerate it. We would not be able to fathom it. Just the blessing of thought, of speech, of movement, of sight, of hearing. Too many to count. So even in the one blessing, right? How much would people give if they lost their sight? How much would they give to see again? They'd give everything. If they had billions, they would give them. If they had hundreds of billions, they would give them. So all of the blessings that we have are priceless. So then, if that's the pricelessness of the blessings, and if the whole world, the earth, is a blessing, then what do we do with these blessings? What should be our attitude, or let's say our response to all of these blessings? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also informs of this. وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. And if you were to praise me, or to have gratitude, I will increase you. So our ulama, they say that the praise of the blessing is specific to the blessing, which means that if I have the blessing of eyesight, then I should use my eyes in a way by which God intended. And if I have the blessing of speech, then I should use my speech in a way that Allah has intended. I should not lie. I should not malign. I should not gossip, spread innuendo. I should not harm other people with my speech. That's the minimum of a blessing, is not to harm others with it, or harm yourself. So what about all the whole world around us? What about the rivers and the trees and the birds and the animals? How do we show gratitude for those blessings? It's clear. We should honor them. We should preserve them. We should bring no harm to them. The Prophet ﷺ spoke to the animals. The camel spoke to him. The deer spoke to him. Water spoke to him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. All of these things are alive. All of these things have a soul. Not like our soul. They're not soulless. But if all of them are reverberating the message of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then every single one of them is in essence a representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or an ambassador, let's say, of Allah. Because it's an ambassador from God to us to remind us of who the one is. So how do you treat ambassadors? Do we kill them? Do we abuse them? Even the international law of ambassadors today, even if two warring countries are at war and then they send an ambassador, then the ambassador is supposed to be respected and not to be harmed and to be allowed to speak and heard out and so forth. And it would be a travesty for anyone to harm an ambassador. So what about the whole kawn, right? The whole existence itself is an ambassador from Allah to us. And the amana, the trust, has been placed in us. So as I said earlier, then how is it that our moment, our cultural moment, is different? Well, we think everything is alive. And we think everything has a right, has a haqq. Prophet ﷺ said, "Ati kulli dhi haqqin haqqa." Give everything its right. This is the, let's say, the primary or golden rule of how we interact with everything else around us. Always give it its right. And a second rule, leave it or interact with it such as that in its state, it leaves in a better state or the same state than when you first encountered it. Right? You should not be walking down the street and there's some trees or there's some bushes or things like that and you disrupt it. Or there's an anthill and you disrupt it. And you left it off in a worse state than when it encountered you. No, you should live it in a better state. And if that's true for all the things around us, it's also true for human beings. Leave people in a better state, or at least the same state, than when you first encountered them. Imagine if everybody was living like that. If everyone was living according to these practices and these principles, how different would the world be? But if we see man as the center of the universe, if we see the human being as the center of the universe, and everything is at his or her disposal to do with in any which way it pleases him or her, here is the result. Depleted fish stocks in oceans, climate change, people in the UK now not having to foot energy bill that's £500 and £600 a month. What is that the result of? Is that just kind of inflation? Is that like the reason? Or is there underlying reasons? Are there underlying dynamics to all of that? And I believe there are underlying dynamics to all of that. We have not held up this responsibility. We have not filled this responsibility Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed before us of observing the amana, of taking on the amana. And that means equity and fairness for all, not enrichment of a few at the expense of the many. And you find that also even in the economic practice of the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ, for example, he would not allow a caravan to be greeted outside of the city. Why? He did not want anyone to go out, buy the whole caravan goods, monopolize it, and then bring it to the market, and then they could charge whatever price that they want. Rather, it comes to market, multiple buyers, multiple sellers, and then it would be fair and equitable. So not to bend the rules, not to make new rules, not to make different rules for the enrichment of the few at the expense of the many. And you could also make an argument, this has always been, why did the Quraysh so staunchly oppose the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? They weren't really that invested in idol worship. I mean, they didn't really believe in it that much. But it was a challenge to the status quo and the continued enrichment of the few at the expense of the many. And the Prophet ﷺ came with something different. Why, when some of the prophets came with their legislation, with their sharia, they said to him, does your Lord tell us to leave our other gods and to not do with our money as we please? See how they couldn't understand how these two things at the same time. What's the relationship between believing and worshipping the one true Lord and to have these honorable monetary practices? It's all one manzuma, as they say. It's all one part of a holistic ecosystem. So being in the first person in the first line of prayer at Fajr is matloob. It's a good thing. But also being equitable in the market and not swindling, not misrepresenting your merchandise, not fully disclosing any defects in your merchandise are also part of the Sharia and just as important. But unfortunately for many Muslims, we've kind of shifted or focused on the individual devotional acts, those obligations, and we've lost sight of the communal obligations, of the communal aspect, of how our actions affect others. And if the whole universe around us is alive, and the whole universe around us is singing the praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then can we really afford to continue practicing an Islam that is more or less excluded or specified in the mosque or in the madrasa, and not in the market, not on the motorway, not in your place of work, not in your home? How can we? And we see the result. We see the result. And I'm not here to tell you to blame people, to blame one of us. We look at ourselves. ابدأ بنفسك ثم من تعود. Start with yourself and then those who are around you, those that you bear some responsibility for. We can at least apply it within ourselves. We can at least apply it within our homes. And then when we apply it in our homes, we can at least apply it within our neighborhoods. from our neighborhoods into our communities. This is how the true change takes place. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, there were roughly 4,000 to 5,000 people living in Mecca. That's it. Of those at the time of the Hijrah, which is around this time, we just started the new year, 1444, Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, 70 or so people made the Hijrah out of 4,000 to 5,000. That was it, very small group. But that small group was able to change the very nature, the paradigm of the universe at the time. And within a quarter of a century, that message had spread from beyond the particular Arabian Peninsula, all the way beyond to what is now Afghanistan and even China to the east, and all the way to Morocco in the west. Was it because they were technically savvy? Was it because they had the best weapons? They had the best communication system? They had 5G? No, none of those things. But what they had was the Quranic paradigm, an upending paradigm. Flipped everything on its head. Wasn't about tribal affiliations. Wasn't about the strong versus the weak, and the strong taking advantage of the weak. But it was about the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was about serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was about serving the creatures and the children of God. That's referred to one of the hadith. All of creation. And it was not about personal attainment or egoistic achievements. No, they sacrificed much. But we are enjoying, all of us, the fruits of those sacrifices. If they did not sacrifice, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't know Islam. We wouldn't know anything. So the mission is big. The mission is great. And yes, we should be very concerned with the environment. Yes, we should be very concerned with climate change. But all of that has to be underpinned by the correct understanding of our place in the universe. Everything is alive. Everything is a sign. Everything is a manifestation of the divine glory. And if you see the world like that, and you read the universe, and every opportunity that you get, that you wake up in the morning, and it's another day by which to increase in recognition of the divine favors that Allah has sent your way, and to increase in Iman, then it won't take that many of us to change things. Just a few people can change a neighborhood, can change a community, can make it into something else. And it's not us that is changing anything. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who changes everything. We just have the honor of being affiliated with that change of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we can see through the depths of existence and see the one true existence, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we would see everything. One of the great ulama, Ibn Arabi al-Hatimi, he said everything is alive, everything has a soul, but we don't see it because we don't contemplate. We don't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough. He said go into khalwa, go into a simple isolation and just contemplate, think, hymn the praises of Allah, say la ilaha illallah, say subhanallah, say alhamdulillah, say la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, say hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, and say it with contemplation and with reverence, and open your eyes and the world will look different. Things will look different. You will see the nutq, right? You will see things speaking to you. You will see the trees speaking to you. You will see the rocks speaking to you. You will see the ocean speaking to you. You'll see the sky and the clouds. They all have something to say. But if we're blinded and we can't see it, and we're distracted, and we're in our screens, and we're in our Netflix, and we're in our distractions all the time, then the heart won't see anything. The heart will be distracted. If it's busy with the false images. People today don't really worship false gods. I mean, the paganism is around, but there's no one has erected an idol of Manat, Wallat, Wal-Uzza in Peterborough somewhere. But what we do preoccupy ourselves with are false images. Images that are not even real. People manipulate the images. You call it filter, you call it whatever you want. It's a false image. And then we see that as reality. Can you imagine the effect that has on us if we are constantly looking at that all the time? And then how that warps our perception of reality? No, we need to be more in contact with our real reality, with our real environment. We need to be taking walks. We need to have our children with their hands in the dirt and touching it and feeling it. We need to be raising our own animals, growing our own crops, baking our own food, cooking our own food, having community gardens, teaching people how to garden, teaching people how to raise animals, teaching people how to sew their own clothing. That shirt that you got from Primark, that's the store, that you got for like 10 quid or 9 quid. How do you think it's so cheap like that? There's a whole story behind that of why it's so inexpensive and why it's like that. And it involves oppression of some people far off. It involves people maybe working for a pound a day, if that, making that shirt for you, so that you only pay 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, or what it is for it. And we as Muslims, we really have the last and final challenge to this hegemonic system. No one else is coming. No one else has the proper metaphysics still preserved and understood. We may not be practicing it, we may not be well in tune with it, but it's there. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us that it will continue to be there to the last day, day of judgment. There will always be people who know how to read Quran. There will always be people who know how to teach fiqh. There will always be people who know how to nurture people's souls, to have a greater realization of God. Those things will always be there. But are we availing ourselves? Are we sacrificing? Are we putting forth the effort in order to fully realize that potential and show gratitude for all those myriad blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed before us? So, I didn't want to speak the whole time. I wanted to leave more time for people to ask questions and maybe have more of a conversation. But I just wanted to kind of put the main points that I think are important for the beginning of a revival, at least. And that revival has to begin within ourselves. If we try to change society around us and communities, and we fail to recognize that the most important change and transformation has to be inward, then we're not going to get anywhere. It's not going to be lasting. And that's the way our companions were of the Prophet ﷺ. They became something completely different. And we have the potential to do that too. Not because of our own ability, not because of anything, but because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِعَزِيزٍ. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Thank you so much all for listening. I hope there was some benefit in it. And I'm looking forward to having more of a conversation about this evening and hopefully also into the future. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair.
And as we said, I have questions. If you would like something, feel free to pass it to one of the partition there, and then something I can filter those. While people do
manifestation of the divine names upon those things so that we can see that happening. You see what's called in Arabic at-tajalli, right? Like when Moses alayhi salam, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after Allah spoke to him in a manner commensurate with his majesty, he said, Arini anzur ilayk. You know, he was in a state. He's like, let me see you. You spoke to me, now I want to see you. And Allah said back to him, Lan taran. You will not see me. Lakin unzur ila al-jabal. But look to the mountain. فإن استقر مكانه فسوف تراني. If it stays in its place, then you will see me. فلما تجلى ربه للجبل جعله دكا وخر موسى صاعقا قال إني تبت إليك. So when Allah manifested to the mountain, it disintegrated. And Musa alayhi salam fell in prostration to Allah's command. So he saw not Allah, but he saw, in a sense, Allah in the tajalli. And it said that the Sahaba, for example, some of them would say, there was not something that I saw except I saw Allah before it. And one would say it was not something I saw except I saw Allah after it. And it was not something I saw except I would see Allah in it. So forth. So, in essence, it's seeing the signs and seeing that manifestation in all things. So it's not really the rocks talking to you or the trees talking to you. Yes, sensory perception has a role to play. And definitely there's a link between the two, but it's more about the perception of the heart, right? It's more about removing distraction from the heart. It's more about focus and what I would call a spiritual focus or contemplative meditation. And that can happen when you're not distracted by everything around you. So for example, when people ask, you know, I'm not really focused in prayer and I'm kind of thinking about the children or the gas bill or whatever it might be, the response to that would be, well, how are you focused outside of the prayer? You know, we will go into the prayer and we think like, Allahu Akbar, and then, but how are you before the prayer? How are you outside of the prayer? The prayer is a means, it's to help us to achieve focus, but in order to properly leverage those means, we have to have focus outside of the prayer too. That's why the Prophet said, in the majority of Qur'an, the delight of my heart or my eye is in the prayer, it's not the prayer itself. So within the prayer, because the prayer is what's called a munajah, right? It's you having a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day. You're speaking to God, right? And when you're speaking to God, God speaks to you. When you remember Allah, Allah remembers you. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. So they say that the key is recognizing that your remembrance of God is in essence God's remembrance of you, because you would not be able to remember God if He didn't remember you. So recognizing that, what they call sometimes a mahbubiyya, recognizing that you're loved by Allah Ta'ala when He remembers you, and the sign of that is you remembering Him. So reorienting our relationship with Allah from a transactional one to a devotional one. Most people today, when they worship Allah, they do it because they want something from God. And when they ask, they want something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they'll do these good deeds so forth because they want something back from Allah. Ahlullah, the people of God, don't look at it like that. They say the good deeds that I do is a sign from God that He is happy with me, that He is pleased with me. And if He is pleased with me, I am pleased with Him. When we get to that understanding, then things become more alive. Alive in the sense of, you see the reality of them. Not just the facade, not just the surface, not just even the sensory aspect of them, but you see the inner meaning and inner core of them. That's what we're trying to get at. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Jazakallah for your speech. I think just about 2 points I've just been thinking about what you're mentioning. So you know about the signs of Allah, and you see when people talk about tree hugging or hearing things, it's similar to the perception of what people do with istikhara nowadays, where they just feel that istikhara is through dreams, whereas, like I said, it's about, I think, it's to do with that penetrating the reality of the signs of God. So if you have anything.
Istikhara in Arabic means to seek the good. So istikhara means to seek the good. It may not necessarily manifest in a dream or in a particular feeling towards a decision you want to make. but our teachers taught us, do istikhara in everything, and then when you have something to do, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to guide you in the right way, whatever outcome that you choose. Because you sought the istikhara. So it may not necessarily be like, oh, I have an inclination. Sometimes that may occur, but that's not necessary. And it's also a good practice to do istikhara every day. So istikhara for all of your affairs, not just for something particular that you're seeking, but as a general devotional practice. And then you could say, you know, and you know, to have an you know, to you say this matter or all of, or say all of my matters that they be in alignment with what you desire of me, and if it leads to good, make it easier for me, and if it leads to something else, then put it away from me. Start your day every day like that, and you'll see the difference.
Okay. And second word was within this green technology atmosphere. I used to work for the fire brigade, London Fire Brigade, and one of the things you realise was that when people get housing extension done and use green insulation in the houses, it might be green friendly, but they also can be more flammable. And this is something which isn't talked about, where there's facade within the green space. So just to be aware of that. How's it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say something. This is my opinion, but I think a lot of the things going on in that space, we have to take a second look at. You know, like you know, vegan sausage and vegan patties and vegan hamburgers, and you know, what's the kind of the economic footprint of that? It may not be meat, but what's the economic footprint? And Tesla electric cars, how much nickel are they using? How much of the power grid, if everybody had an electric car, would take from that if everyone was charging their car at night? So there's a lot of excitement about these alternative things, but from a very business sense. But is it actually going to produce the effect that people are looking for? And you know, the reality of it is, we're talking about a very small segment of the world population is using, is abusing the world's resources. So UK, Europe, Western Europe, United States, Australia. Go to Africa, the whole African continent, especially Southern Africa, not even, you know, a negligible footprint compared to the rest of these countries. And they live quite simply, right? And these are the so-called underdeveloped countries. But everybody knows that the future is in Africa, because it's still to some degree unspoiled and not abused in terms of its natural resources. The only thing in terms of natural resources that are used in Africa are their waters, their oceans. Because European companies have come and depleted their fish stocks, like around Somalia, right? And then in East Africa coast and around, you know, Morocco, Cape Verde, and in the West African coast. So I think it's going to come to a head eventually, and it's about really thinking about the culture of materialism and consumerism, and you know, how much do we actually need to eat, to clothe ourselves, to you know, travel in terms of distances and things like that, and automobiles, and you know, that's what we're getting at. I think there's a bigger picture here than just some of these very rich, relatively rich, wealthy Western European and USA kind of just moving on to a new industry that may have the same footprint or even bigger footprint, and then yet all of the other countries still are suffering under that, and they're providing the raw resources, but with very little benefit to their own economies. And that still remains a story. Yes?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for making the time for coming down to us today. And more of a, I don't know if there's going to be a question at the end, but more of a commentary, something you sparked in me when you mentioned everything's alive. So I've been looking and discussing with other people in our class and with our teacher about the vibrations and frequencies of atoms and how that works, and how certain things, as in how the world speaks to us. For example, some people are terrified of the ocean. The frequencies of the ocean terrify them for some reason, and other people love it. Like myself, I would love to live near the ocean just because I like the frequency. And digging into that a bit deeper at the atomic level of, that's where we find God at some point, at that level. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
God can be found in many different places. Yeah, everyone has you can say everyone has a route to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that does not resemble someone else's route. That's what some of the people of Allah, they say that the routes to Allah are as many as the number of souls. So each soul is going to have a particular thing that may resonate with them. And one of the things that is kind of odd or remarkable is in many of our Muslim communities is there's this pressure to be kind of uniform, and we all have to kind of be the same, and dress the same, and like look the same, and adopt the same habits. And if you look to the prophetic community, it wasn't quite like that. There was much greater diversity amongst people in terms of even their levels of religious practice and their commitments, but at the same time they were still welcomed as part of the community. So we had some of the great Sahaba like Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali, and Uthman, others, and then we had the desert Bedouins who would come to maybe saw the Prophet once, would come literally urinate in the masjid and leave, and never to be seen again. Or the one who would come ask a question and say, if I just pray the 5 times and and pay the zakat, is that enough? It's enough, and he leaves, and he's never to be seen again. So Islam is vast. It's not this cookie cutter sort of uniform approach that every single person has to adopt in a particular way. The only form of Islamic dress we have is a modest dress. Certain things have to be covered. But in terms of colors and fabrics and cultural styles, it's the Muslim female dress is not just a black thobe and a black scarf. That's in the Gulf, Arab states, but that's not where it is in the rest of the world. And so to generalize and represent it as something that is universal is problematic. And that's something the modern world wants to do, right? Universal human rights. Who made them universal? Because Western Europe and the United States agreed upon them? Did you ask the rest of the world if they have an opinion about what it is or what it's not? And so many of these things that have come out of very human-centric European paradigm or American paradigm are now being exported to all parts of the world and represented as something that is universal. And it's not universal. We have our own paradigm, and so we adopt the paradigm, we embody it, but there's many, many ways it can manifest. Different ways it can manifest. Just look at Islamic architecture from Jakarta to Tanja, right? From Jakarta in Indonesia to Tanja in Tangiers in Morocco. They both look like mosques, they both look like houses of worship, but they're different. And they're commensurate with their environment. One of the things you'll notice about even our architectural styles, if you look at it compared to on the horizon of the environment, it's soothing to the eye. It's not grating, right? A lot of the steel and the concrete and modern architecture is grating in terms of looking at the rest of the natural environment around you. But you look to traditional buildings, and I have to say, coming from the U.S., the UK has a lot more of that than, let's say, the U.S. does, which is a much newer country. But you feel there's a sense of ease and a sense of soothing. And, one of the things that they understood in how they built mosques is that it's not just a functional place in terms of the physical dimensions, but there's also a spiritual dimension, right? The high ceilings, the spaciousness, the airiness of it, the way that the placing of the mihrab and the minbar and the acoustics. All of these were taken into consideration in traditional Muslim architecture. And nowadays it's become just a very functional thing. We build houses now that can neither absorb heat during the winter nor keep out the heat during the summer. And so we have to have artificial means of staying warm and artificial means of staying cool. And most of your homes here, I understand, don't have air conditioning. So you may be on the precipice of a new era where people feel they have to get air conditioning. So, but my point is that all of that goes back to this Quranic paradigm of understanding why we're here, what we're doing, and that everything is put into its place and everything has a right upon us. So I think that's where we start. Yes?
You've briefly mentioned this, Shaykh, but there are conversations going on about adopting a vegan lifestyle to offset the dangers of climate change and people generally eating meat a lot. I just want to know, where does Islam stand when it comes to veganism? Because I know a lot of Muslims that are not even eating the sacrificial meat on the day of Eid because they're saying because of the dangers of what it's done to the society and the environment. So I just want to know, where do we stand with veganism and Islam?
Well, I can tell you where I stand. I can't speak for Islam. all of it. But I think our main issue, which we'd agree with many people who are in what's called the vegan movement, is commercially produced meat is problematic. I'm a little bit familiar with at least meat production in the United States, especially beef and chicken. Very, very problematic in the way that it's being produced. And not just for the economic or environmental footprint, but also the abuse that many of these animals go under or have to endure, especially chickens and cows. You know, close quarters. The chickens are artificially enhanced with hormones. They grow very quickly so that they can be sold quickly. They often have to cut their beaks off so as not to kill one another inside the chicken coop. Where I live, still maintain a home in Pennsylvania, I've driven past these places and you have 5,000 chickens in like maybe a space this big. And that's an example of how the Quranic paradigm is certainly not being observed. It's just a pure profit-making economic interest, and there's not a lot of concern about the welfare of the animals, for example. So I think we should tend towards ethically and healthily based food. So the Quran instructs us to have halal and tayyib. يا أيها الرسول كلوا من الطيبات وأعملوا صالحا. So the instruction to the messengers of God, eat from the tayyibat. And tayyib is not just something that's slaughtered properly. Tayyib means that the animal is tended to properly and ate properly and eats the things it's supposed to eat. Right? Cows are meant to graze on grass. They're not supposed to eat like cornmeal or anything like that. And chickens should have room to graze, and sheep and so forth, not to be just mass produced in this manner to serve the consumption patterns of a few Western countries, which is what's happening. And the prophetic practice was meat was eaten very selectively. The hadith in the Shama'il said, كان صلى الله عليه وسلم يأكل اللحم لا يأكل اللحم إلا غبا. Right, from time to time, and usually when there would be like, you know, some occasion or something like that. And the 2 and 3 months would go by in the prophetic household, and there would be no fire kindled, which means they didn't even cook anything. So you can almost say the Prophet ﷺ was like a semi-vegetarian. And he would say that no house is poor if they have vinegar. Khal. And on the day that he entered Mecca and went to the house of his aunt, all she had was khal. All she had was vinegar. And that's what he ate. Yeah, here, think of any other conquering army entering into a city. What do they usually do? They pillage it, they take everything. He went to his family's house, and all she had was vinegar and some bread, and that's what he ate. Yom Fath Makkah, the day of the conquest of Mecca, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we should not disparage meat eating on the basis that killing animals is wrong. No, there's qualifications of how we go about doing it, and to be done humanely and so forth, and also to be done ethically and produced ethically. And I think in general people should reduce their consumption of meat and focus more on healthier options, definitely. And you can see, you know, heart disease is the leading cause of death in most Western countries, followed by cancer, and a lot of that has to do with diet and consumption and overconsumption of certain things like meat. So I don't think we should be balanced. And I think, you know, like the question that was asked earlier about environmental groups, even with vegan groups, we have our own paradigm, our own understanding, and we can. I think we should be able to articulate it in a way that is balanced, and I think that also resonates with many people in the world. Anyone else?
I've got a question.
Yes.
You mentioned the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching Adam the names of Allah. What's meant by the names in this verse? Is it the divine names?
The divine names, the languages, the names of everything. How to communicate all of that can be intended within
So what does that mean for us as the descendants of Adam?
We are descendants of the one who had all of the names, and so علمه البيان, right? That fourth verse in Surah Al-Rahman, taught him bayan, how to articulate, how to speak. And the Muslim logicians, they define human being as a haywan and nafiq, whereas the Greek logicians said the rational animal, so the animal that can reason, whereas the Arab one said that haywan and nafiq, the animal that can articulate. So articulation and speaking and bayan is seen as an aspect of humanity that's unique to humanity, in the way that we can, well, not just to formalize the thoughts, but to actually communicate it to others. And that's really the essence of prophethood and messengerhood. One of the key attributes of messengerhood is tabligh, is to convey, is to tell others, is to drop it off, to show the message to others. And human interaction is vital in that aspect. The Quran says, have taqwa of Allah and be with the salihin, be with the ones who are honest and upright and trustworthy and truthful. And our teachers always tell us that the best way to have a more pious life or a more pious commitment to the religion is to be with people who already have that. And when you're people who have that already, then it's easier to practice it. That's why Islam was never meant to be practiced like, a monastery. There is no monasticism. We didn't build monasteries. We built cities. I was just remarking to my wife today that Islam is meant to be urban. It's meant to be in cities and walking distances and people interacting and going to the market and exchanging greetings and exchanging services and goods and that level of interaction. That's really how Islam spread. People who just made themselves a part of everyone else's everyday life. And just live your life as a Muslim. Just be a Muslim and interact with people. To me, that's the da'wah. You are the message. That's always been the message. Not a book you give someone or a pamphlet, but you yourself, you're the message. You embody that message. That's, and the people are with you. People see that. I think that makes a lot of difference. Yes, in the back.
Thank you for your talk. It's very refreshing to actually understand that we should be in with our own soul as well as everything around us. From a practical sense, I mean that change always begins with the self. But you mentioned, let's say, clothing of Primark being cheap. There's a whole story behind that, which is understandable. But from a practical level, when you're balancing, just say, paying bills and buying clothes for children, uniform, etc., how can you, clothing for children is a necessity and we need to purchase it. Consumerism, etc., for ourselves, we can manage as adults. But how do we then manage clothing children with paying the extra to buy ethically sourced clothing? Also food-wise, some of the ethically grown animals, there are farms around us, but it's very, very expensive to buy the meat. And for feeding a family, how do we, in our daily lives, sort of manage this?
That's a very, very good question. Probably 50, 60 years ago, people who didn't have access to means or resources or wealth ate little and were maybe looked emaciated or thin. And people who were wealthy had access to those means and resources and were obviously more flesh on their bones. And that even the flesh on the bones was kind of an indicator of, this person has means and has wealth. Today it's the opposite. Today, cheap, non-nutritious food is plentiful, but it's also very unhealthy, and it leads to all sorts of issues with one's health, including bloating and weight gain and digestive issues and a myriad of things beyond that. And it's people of means and resources who can afford the ethically based, halal, organic, grass, pasture meat. So we have to be practical, or I should say we have to be realistic. We're not pragmatists, but we have to be realistic. So I think for most of us, working families, we have to kind of pick and choose where we're going to, be able to apply that as much as we can. And the Arabs have a saying, they say that, مَا لَا يُدْرَكُ كُلُّ لَا يُتْرَكُ جُلُّ. That which you cannot do all of it, then don't abandon the whole thing. So it's enough to be able to choose from the perspective of your intention, and let's also say from a spiritual benefit perspective that, okay, and the things that I have the ability to do the best of my, to apply that, I will do it. And the things that I cannot, then I'll seek guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So maybe in terms of food, that's a little more important than clothes, right? Considering also the health benefits. So that should be probably higher on the priority list than, going to the store like, what's it called? Uniqlo or whatever, with all the simple looking clothes but very expensive, right? Linen and cottons and things like that. Do as much as you can to your ability. But it's reflective of kind of the warped economic paradigm that we live in. That fizzy drinks are cheaper than bottled water. How's that possible? But that's the state of affairs, right? Because there's a whole economics behind that, right? High fructose corn syrup is highly subsidized, for example, in the United States, because there's a surplus of corn. And when there's a surplus of corn, then they need high fructose corn syrup so that they can get some economic benefit from it. But did they consider the health effects that would have on people? When literally everything that you eat, even bread, has high sugar content in it. So that one to me would be like the first thing we look at. Look at the ingredients, avoid those ultra-processed foods. So maybe we can't get the best organic meat and so forth, but definitely avoid ultra-processed foods. Eat whole foods, fruits, vegetables. Meat could be used as a garnish. Doesn't have to be the main aspect of the meal, right? And then you're working with vegetables most of the time. It's going to take a little bit of a lifestyle change. And then on the occasion that you out with friends and you want to share a meal outside and things like that. We don't have to be, I don't want to say the word fanatical, but you don't have to be kind of a spoiled sport and someone people don't want to associate with because they're too fanatical about their eating habits. But in your home, right, on a daily basis, day-to-day routine, I think we have a little bit more of flexibility to apply that if we choose to do so. Yes.
Can you speak a bit about the fitr and how in the West we can live as closely to our fitr as we can?
Well, the fitra is described in the Quran, fitra nasr fi fatra nas alayha, la tabdila li khalqillah. So the fitra is something primordial and inherent within us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given everything its fitra, right? And fitra means like the origin of something. So for us, the fitra means we are pristine, we are pure, we are born that way. And that also means we also have the faculties by which to live, let's say, the fitra-centric life. The only thing that gets in the way of that is human habituation, right? Things that we learn, things that we come into contact with, things that may steer us off the path. Hence the purpose of religion, hence the purpose of the deen. We say 17 times a day, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, guide us to the straight path. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, aminu. So you already have belief, but renew your belief, renew your intention, renew your resolve. So really it's about renewal to get back to the fitra. And some say that the fitra is that day, which wasn't a day, but when Allah said to all the souls in the words of Adam, Alastu bi rabbikum, qalu bala, shahidna. I am not your Lord, and we all testify, and bore witness, yes indeed, Allah, you are our Lord. So it's getting back to that sort of spiritual moment internally that we're all trying to get back to. And so to live a wholesome life, to apply the deen as much as we can, and to go about it in a way that is sustainable and brings benefit not just to us, but to our family members and those around us. Unfortunately, religiosity to some today means sternness and not being friends with anybody and severing relationships. This person got religious all of a sudden, so they don't talk to their parents anymore because they're not religious enough, and he hides himself in his room and shaves his head and is listening to Quranic recitation or nasheed all day, and when his mother calls him down to come share a meal, he doesn't come. That's not religiosity. at all. That's the opposite of it. You know, that's what's called tanfir. Bashiru wa la tunaffiru. Right? Give people glad tidings. Make people smile. Make them happy. La tunaffiru. Right? Don't do tanfir. Don't push them away from the deen. That's not religiosity. So religiosity should not be munaffir. It should not be soul crushing to the people closest to you. What are they going to think of the religion then if that's what you wind up doing to them as a result? So fitna means, you know, do things in the manner they're supposed to be done in a moderate way. Moderate means that we do it in a way that we want it to make it part of who we are forever. You jump into something full force all at once, you will tire of it. You want to pray tahajjud every night for 2 hours? Good goal, but you can't do it for the first time you try it. You may need a year to get to that, because you build it slowly. First you do 5 minutes, do that for a month, you know, wake up 5-10 minutes before Fajr, good. Do that for a month, then just ease your way into it. This has been the hadith of Bukhari. وَلَا يُشَدَّدِينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَهُ فَسَدِّدُوا وَقَارِبُوا تَسْدِيدُ وَتَقْرِيب. Saddidu, plug in the holes and get as close as you can. Right? And seek out certain times of the day. Before Fajr, sometime before Maghrib, and something of the night. That's what the Prophet said. Someone over here.
Sorry, just a quick question really. First, I want to thank you, Shaykh, for coming down. I think on behalf of everybody here in Peterborough, really grateful for your presence, and Allah reward you for everything that you've expressed, and maybe we'll take benefit from it. I think one question I had is, like, from many years ago, I think in gatherings there were many kind of spiritual gatherings and many people would take part, and I think I kind of feel, I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of feel houses and hearts were more illuminated in the remembrance of Allah. And I think lately, I don't know if it's COVID or prior to COVID, some people are distancing themselves towards the deen. Is there anything that you can suggest? I mean, one thing that I'm thinking, that a revival of events like these is another, you know, having scholars like yourself attending and obviously people benefiting from, and brings people closer to the deen. And I think maybe COVID has probably taken people into isolation, that isolation not necessarily being beneficial. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the thought of isolation most people did in COVID wasn't the preferred type, which is, you know, you and God and remember and dhikr. It's more like you and your Netflix account. That's not the isolation that I think we were looking for. And you know, one of my teachers, he said that kind of the khalwa, or the kind of sacred isolation of our time, is sohbah, is good companionship. So I think it's more important that we revive the idea of good companionship first. You know, people are hungry for good people, good souls, people who remind them of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, the people of God remind you of God, and the people of dunya remind you of the dunya. So we want to be with the people of God, who remind us of God, and we look at them and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we want to be with people like that for other people. You know, and really, if you can make an environment like that, life becomes really something really nice. You know, all of the things that people chase after in terms of dunya and material acquisition and so forth, it's so fleeting and so unfulfilling, even once you capture it. But you know, long-lasting friendships and you know, intimate friendships with people and communities, and you know, raising your kids together and having gatherings like this and breaking bread and sharing food, and that's really the sweetness of life. Other than that, why would we want to be here? What's, you know, so we can drive a fast car or something like that. I mean, has its thrill, I mean, for the moment, but it's not the same as kind of this enduring type of thing that also will help you build the future generations. You know, you build something like that. Once you build a community, it's like a community that your kids will benefit from, and your grandkids and your great-grandkids. You know, that's really the legacy of Islam. You know, to be rooted like that. Rooted in the earth, as we said, and then rooted spiritually with the building of communities around you. And I think that's what our community should be working for. There has been too much sort of trivial sectarianism and wedge issues that people get caught up over in our masajid, especially unfortunately in the UK. You know, and then you come into the mosque and it doesn't feel like the place you want to be. You know, you're more comfortable in King's Cross Station than your local masjid, and something's wrong with that, right? So, you know, young people and people coming to Islam, I think you can do it differently. So, and this space has that feel, to be honest with you. So.
I'm wondering, we may take that amount of time for Maghrib is just about popped in. You don't take a few more questions?
I don't mind. One more question. Yes.
I have a question. Like, as a young person, obviously our surroundings and the people that we're around is a lot of not amazing situations. So how do we deal with that in the sense of, obviously we're all trying to get closer to Allah, but it's dealing with those relationships that we've been in prior, and like dealing with that in a way that's not going to affect everything. Do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of, I don't want to say I don't want to lose a friendship with somebody who's not religious, or and I'm trying to get closer. How do I deal with that in the boundaries and stuff like that?
I think you answered your question. We don't want to cut off friendships. We don't want to sever relationships. We want to keep people in the loop, as it were. But at the same time, not compromise things we don't want to compromise. And I think honesty and transparency are the best things here. You know, and I think if you're with certain friends, sometimes that works. They say that, you know, still want to continue this, and I'm here for you, but I'm kind of, you know, doing this right now. And sometimes maybe that doesn't work. Depends on the person and the nature of the relationship. So our first commitment is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but being committed to people doesn't mean you're not committed to Allah. You know, you have to put it in the prism and the understanding that that's part of my commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That I don't sever relationships, I don't cut people off, I don't, you know, dispose of them like they didn't mean anything to me. No, the Prophet ﷺ was very patient with many people, decades. They even fought him. You know, they fought wars against him. His father-in-law, Abu Sufyan, fought 20 years against him before he accepted Islam. Even the husband of his daughter Zainab fought against him in Badr. So, but the Prophet ﷺ still maintained those, you know, those relationships and still cared for them. And even when he went to the Hijrah, which we're commemorating now, people still had their wada'a, they left their amanat, their means for safekeeping with him, even though they opposed him, because they knew he was trustworthy. So on the one hand, he's inviting them to Islam, and on the one hand, there was these previous relationships and places of trust that he maintained. And that's for us, you know, is the prophetic model, which is the best thing. So, yeah, just be kind to people. You know, just say kind words to people, and you'll find that a lot of the things we think are insurmountable or hard to overcome, kindness kind of bridges the gap. So is Mother coming? So if you, no one else has any questions, we can. No, I don't see any.
Thank you very much indeed. Will you leave to me for just to finish in a moment?
Sure.
To close this off, obviously our enormous thanks to Shaykh Walead for coming up here. You could have been resting and enjoying a slightly London, so thank you very much. We at New Muslim Circle put this together in memory of our dear sister who passed away just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3, lost count, Maria Yoshkov. So please keep her in your du'as. We mean to make some sadaqah jariyah for her, so we'll be having a collection as we leave, and the intention is that we will plant some trees for her in, we hope in Tunisia where her husband is from, but if we can't get that through the Charity Commission, it'll be somewhere else. But there will be fruit trees, inshallah, in her memory, please, whether you give to that cause or not, will you make dua that those trees put down thick roots and give nutritious fruit to many, many people for centuries to come. So,
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليه وسلم. مسلمنا صفة الجميل. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا هب لنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. يا الله يا الله يا الله بجاه أسماء الله وصفات الله وأنبياء الله ورسل الله والصالحين من عباد الله نقضي حوائجنا ظاهرا وباطنا وما أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه وارزقنا حسن الخاتمة نصر وفتح خير وبشر المؤمنين وإنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك سألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة. لك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد حتى القضاء لك الحمد بعد الرضا ولك الحمد كالذي نقول لك الحمد كالذي تقول لك الحمد خير مما نقول ولك الحمد على كل حال. كعالم السر منا لا تهتك الستر عنا وأعافنا واعف عنا وكلنا حيث كنا. ما يقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من الغفلة عنك. ما يقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من الغفلة عنك. واجعل آخر كلامنا لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله كما يليق بكماله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين. فاتحة.
So inshallah we'll have a Jama'ah here for those who want to stay in the room. We may need to just move these screens, brothers, they're quite heavy. Watch the feet, don't fall. If you could just move them so the ladies can be behind it, we can be prep. That would be great.
Hasan, burası açıyor.